Hey everybody, thanks for joining me here today. This is Nichole with Topaz, and today we are here to talk about eliminating noise in shadow areas and night images. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Noise is definitely going to be more of an issue within shadow areas of your imagery, whether you're taking low light imagery indoors or night images. As you start to increase the brightness of your image, you're going to start seeing that noise much more evidently in the shadow areas. There are reasons behind this, most of it having to do with the fact that light is not reaching that part of the digital sensor within the camera, so it's going to go ahead and just start. It's not going to have as much information there for you, so it's going to have discolored areas, which is known as color noise, and some contrast noise. It's going to have what you call luminosity noise or luminance noise. So it's going to look like little white or black contrast dots. You can also, if you have a really high ISO setting, you'll also start to see some banding noise that comes across. Banding noise is going to be lines of color or luma type of noise that you see going across your entire image. The great thing about Topaz DeNoise is it is a very strong tool for heavy amounts of noise. There are lots of noise reduction tools out there that are going to be able to solve small amounts of noise reduction without having to go into a separate type of tool. However, if you're shooting high ISO, if you're shooting night imagery with long exposures, that tend to increase noise as well. If you're shooting in low light situations where you have to have a really high or fast shutter speed and high ISO, DeNoise is going to be the best tool that's going to be able to reduce the really heavy noise. It's just really good at that, and that's where it really shines. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'll show you some before and after images here, and then we'll go ahead and show you the workflows that I did to achieve each one. This first image here, let's go ahead and scroll into it. And I'll even go a little bit more than 100. Well, we'll stay right here for a second. This is without DeNoise. You can see within the sky a lot of color noise, a lot of luma noise coming across. You'll definitely see it within the shadows, shadow areas. And let me grab my little hand tool here. As you take your image up, I just wanted to show you really how much more noise there is in the shadows than the highlight areas. So once you take that exposure up just a little bit, or the brightness of your image up, you really start to see what's going on. There's quite a bit of banding noise. The banding noise are the lines that are going across. Luma noise, color noise, all different sorts of noise really coming out within that shadow area. As you can see with the highlight areas, you don't see it as much, and this is just part of the sensor, part of a camera sensor. You're going to see it first within that shadow area. You can also see a lot of the banding noise going on up in the sky here and the color noise. And then again with the DeNoise layer, it all disappears and you still get to keep all of the detail that you had in the original image. So that's one of the images we'll be going over. Let me show you a couple other before and afters. We're not going to be going over this particular image, but here's before. You can see a lot of that noise coming through in the shadow areas, especially when you take the brightness up. Now you can see a lot of noise within the highlight as well, especially up close, but this is more of a mid-tone within this image, but you definitely see it within the shadow areas. And with Topaz DeNoise, you're able to keep all of the detail and still get rid of that shadow noise. Let's take a look at, here's a good image. This image was taken in a low light situation. It's a very low lit room, and so a high ISO had to be used along with a fast shutter speed because there was not a tripod at the time. So this is after, but let me show you before. This is something really that's going to be more of the case that you'll start to see in low light situations. As you scroll into the image, you'll see in the more darker areas a lot more shadow. noise coming in, a lot more of that color noise that shows up, and then in your highlight areas, you're just not going to see it as much, or even in your midtone areas. You do see it if you look closely, but it's just not as evident as it is within the shadow areas. After DeNoise, it's able to keep all of that detail in there, and all the detail on her nose and the blankets, everything, and all of the noise was taken out. So this is an image that we'll start off with, but I want to show you a couple others here. Let's go to 100%. This is actually an image that was taken in an area of Dallas called Deep Ellum. The artist of this piece is Dan Culture, and he is an amazing artist, but was down there underneath a bridge, just kind of taking some random shots, and had to really increase the ISO and have a fast shutter speed though, because I didn't want it to be blurry. So here is before. You can see exactly how much noise is really going on here. As you move into the shadow areas, you can just see it really, 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 really well. Even within the art itself and the shadow areas, it just stands out a little bit more. And after DeNoise, able to keep all of the detail and all of the texture within the rock itself without, without smoothing it out and making it look like plastic, which you never want. And you're able to get all the noise out of those shadow areas. So we'll go over this one as well. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and we'll start with this one here. So I'm going to get rid of this top copy. If you are unfamiliar with DeNoise, DeNoise is going to be compatible with Photoshop, Photoshop Elements, Paint Shop Pro, our Photo Effects Lab host, Aperture, Lightroom, iPhoto, many other programs as well. You can check out our compatibility page. Today I am using CS5 as my host. However, you can work the same type of workflow within Photoshop Elements and Paint Shop Pro and any layered program such as Photo Effects Lab. But you can also do the exact same thing in Lightroom and iPhoto by taking in the image in Aperture. Okay, so I'm just going to make a quick background copy to take into Topaz DeNoise. If you want an introduction to Topaz DeNoise, a little bit better of an introduction, we do have that available for you online. I'll go over the interface really quickly, but I really want to focus in on the right-hand side of the interface, the adjustments panel today. But if you're unfamiliar with Topaz DeNoise, on the left is going to be your preset panel. You have all the preset information up at the top, and as you scroll over the presets, it kind of gives you the information of the name, created by, camera, ISO, image type, and the description. This is going to come in very handy when you start making your own presets. You can make your own presets by saving here. When you press save, it's going to give you all of the information to fill out, and it's really important that you know the preset type, either relative to noise estimate or absolute. That's a big question that we get, especially when you're doing something like batch processing or any sort of mass an action or anything like that that is being applied to a folder of images. You're going to want to go with absolute because it's based upon your camera's ISO and shutter speed and aperture settings. Now, if you're just wanting it to actually kind of look like the noise that you eliminated in one image and you bring in an image from a completely different shoot and you still want that kind of to look the same, you can use this relative to noise estimate, and that is going to just kind of estimate exactly how much noise was taken out of the image in the prior image and kind of try to do the same thing to the next image. So it's not going to be an exact same adjustment over here on the right side. It's going to be relative to the image. Again, the absolute will have the exact same reduction settings and detail recovery settings. So you can just say what camera you were using, the ISO, what kind of image type you started off with, etc., etc. Name the preset whatever you would like and press OK, and it'll show up in this preset panel. You can also delete your user presets, import and export for sharing. You do have the original and preview tabs up here to look at your before and after. You can also look at your before and after with your space bar or your left mouse button, so that's important to know as you're working with this so you can really see how much you're eliminating. And then over on the right-hand side, we have our preview navigator where you can move the little red box exactly where you want it, and it will show up in your main preview area. You have the ability to zoom out or zoom in. Know that you can only zoom out to 100% within Topaz DeNoise. A couple other of our programs are like that as well, and it is by design. We want you to be able to see the noise and actually see what the program is trying to work with. Now, it has been requested that we do allow to go a little bit farther out to see the full image. We had that before, and then a lot of people were looking at the full image as they were working with the noise and would kind of make it look way too soft and plasticky when it went back into the host program. But I think we are going to, as we update, allow for people to scroll out. But that is something that is by design currently in the latest DeNoise. You have your preview mode here. We're going to be going over that and the auto brightness here shortly. The undo redo, self-explanatory. We have a snap feature which allows for you to take snapshots of your adjustment panel down here and then scroll through all the different snapshots until you find the final one that you really like, which you can then apply. You have a reset all button. It'll reset everything back to the default settings, and the cancel will get you out without applying anything. OK will process it back into your host program onto the layer that you're working on or onto the image that you are making the adjustments on. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about shadow noise and low light situations like we have here. As you can tell in the shadow areas, this image has not been affected at all. It was brought in through Adobe Camera Raw. I took out all of the noise reduction settings that are default in Adobe Camera Raw. Because they're so bad within this particular image, I really wanted to just work within DeNoise to eliminate it and not another program. Also, there's some sharpening that is by default within Adobe Camera Raw that you definitely want to take out if you're working with a raw image, because anytime you sharpen an image before you take out the noise reduction, especially when you have this really heavy noise, you're going to make it that much more difficult for your noise reduction tool to eliminate it or reduce it, because it makes it that much sharper and it becomes detail as opposed to noise. So that is something to know about, especially if you're working with this really heavy noise. So I do like to work at 100% within DeNoise usually. I just prefer 100% versus 200% because I like to see the detail. So we'll stick there, and we're just going to go over the workflow that I would choose to do this with. You can come over here to your presets and start off with a preset. This is something that, this does have some banding noise within the image, so I might do strongest with debanding just to see what happens. And it'll probably be too strong. It's not too bad. Here's before. Here's after. Again, before and after. Now it is pretty strong and has definitely taken away a lot of the texture within the wall itself, so you'd have to go in and tweak it quite a bit to really pull that back. But everything's looking pretty good as far as color and keeping the blacks nice and black, but you'd have to go in and tweak it quite a bit. You can go into the raw strongest, maybe even come down to raw stronger, try to bring back in some of that texture. Strong, I still want more texture. All right, so here within the strong preset, I've definitely brought back that rock texture that it was actually painted on and taken away the majority of the noise. So this is somewhere where I would start to work if I wanted to start off with a preset. With the really heavy noise that you see, especially within these shadow areas, these presets are not going to be really specific to that, so you would have to come over and tweak. I'm going to go ahead and start from scratch so you can see the entire workflow, and then the next image we'll start off with a preset. so you can see that workflow as well. So I'm going to say reset all and get back to 0. Now these preview modes and auto brightness up here at the top of the adjustment panel are important to the overall workflow when it comes to these 3 tabs. You have 3 tabs: noise reduction, detail recovery, and debanding. This is the workflow that we suggest, that you first do the noise reduction and then the detail recovery. However, I like to actually show the debanding during the presentation because it's really difficult to see after you've done all of these noise reductions and detail recovery. The debanding doesn't make a huge difference, but it does at the beginning of your workflow. And I can see some banding noise going across my image right here. Again, banding noise are going to be long lines that show up in really heavy ISO images or really high ISO images when you have really heavy noise like this. And that is just caused by the digital sensor, something that will happen to most cameras, actually, most digital sensors. So I do see some horizontal and possibly some vertical. So I'm going to come to my debanding and I'm just going to press horizontal. Okay, here's before. Here's after. You can see the horizontal noise right here, the debanding noise. It's pretty small. Here's before. And after. It just kind of disappears. And I'm going to go ahead and see if there's any vertical noise as well. Kind of difficult to tell. Yes, there was. So here's before and after. It's almost like a grid pattern that you see before. Here's before and after. It's kind of hard to see on this image, so I apologize about that. Let me see if I can find another area where it might be more evident. Here's before and after. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and start with my noise reduction. And before I go into my shadow areas, I'm going to need to find a mid-tone area. That is something that I really want to focus in on. So my mid-tone area that I'm going to choose is going to be the wall of the stone here that the painting was painted on. And I'm going to go open my noise reduction. The first slider is overall strength. This really applies to the midtones, and so you're going to want to look at the midtones when you're working with this overall strength. Don't pay attention to the shadow areas that have a little bit more heavier noise. The adjust shadow is where we're going to really start to perfect that image noise, that reduction there. And the same thing with the highlight. We'll work on the highlights and look at a highlight area when we're adjusting the highlight noise. The preview modes are RGB, Luma, color, red, and blue. The RGB is going to give you your normal RGB image where you get to see all of the noise, the luminance noise and the color noise. The Luma channel is going to just show you the luminance noise. So it's only the contrast noise, the white and black contrast noise that you see. And the auto brightness is also going to be important when you're working with all of these preview modes, because sometimes, especially when you're in the Luma channel, you can't really see the noise sometimes. It looked pretty bad in the RGB section, but then when you go to Luma, you say, wait a minute, it really doesn't look all that bad here. Well, let's go ahead and take that auto brightness up, and now you can tell a little bit more noise going on. It just kind of lets you see that noise a little bit better. And again, the overall strength, we're really just looking at the midtones here, and as you take your overall strength up, you'll just start to see some of that reduce, get a little softer. Not necessarily the image getting softer, just the noise itself. So as you take this up, you can start to see that noise just start to disappear. Here's before, and here's after. Again, here's before and after. Now I've lost a little too much detail within the rock for my taste. It's starting to get a little bit of a plasticky effect, but I'm going to move on to the rest of my noise reduction and then come into my detail recovery to see if I can work with that in my detail recovery, because I like the amount of noise that I've gotten rid of so far. Here's before, again, and after, and that's just with the overall strength. Even though the overall strength is specific for midtones, it is going to affect the adjust shadow and adjust highlight and the red and blue color noise for that matter. It's going to adjust everything because it's an overall slider. So you'll notice even within my shadow area of my painting here, this is black, that was reduced as well. However, compared to the midtone areas versus the shadows are still much more noisy, and that's really what we're focusing on here today. So I'm going to come up into a couple different shadow areas. Again, look at my midtones and how smooth everything is here versus the shadow areas and how rough everything is right there. So that is when the adjust shadow comes into the picture. You can just start to take that up, and it's going to work directly on the shadow noise instead of the highlights or midtones. Sometimes it can affect the midtones if it's a very low light image and everything is really low lit, but in this particular image it really does just affect the shadow area. Here's before and here's after. Now, a lot of people, as they have some questions about especially the shadow areas, when they start to push that adjust shadow up, they'll start to see these little heavier artifacts like this. And I want to just give everybody a tip when they're working with night images and shadow areas within their images. Don't worry about all of this kind of larger artifacts that you're seeing. That's actually color noise that we're going to take care of down here in the next three sliders, the red, blue, and clean color. But let me go to the RGB so you can kind of see exactly what I'm talking about. So far we've eliminated a lot of that contrast noise, which are going to be the small dots that really have quite a bit of edge, that luminance noise. But we have all this color noise left over, and that's what you're seeing when you're looking in your Luma mode. It's just those kind of leftover artifacts. So what you need to focus on is those small little contrast luminant noise. If that starts to smooth out in certain areas, like it does quite a bit, don't worry about these larger artifacts. That's a pretty important tip when it comes to shadow noise. All right, and now we get down to our adjust highlight. So adjust highlight, I need to go to a highlight area of my image. So I'm coming over here and looking over here on the left. Here's before, here's after. Already I can tell that my overall strength has increased my noise reduction too much within my highlight area. I find that I almost always take my adjust highlight down to bring back in some more natural types of texture and detail. Let's come over here to the right too. Here's before and after. So we're looking pretty good on our highlights. Okay, now that we're coming down to our adjust color red, we actually have to change our preview mode to see what's going on. I'm going to come back over to a mid-tone and shadow area and go to my red. And this is going to display my red color channel, not necessarily the specifically red noise, but this is the red color channel, and you really get to see some of that, how that red color noise was before and after. So we have done some work on it just by doing the overall strength, the shadow, and the highlight, because that does affect the color noise, but we still have a lot of this noise going on right now. What you want to look for when you're adjusting your red and blue channel colors, you want to look at the smooth areas of your image, like this rock over here, and some of the smooth shadow areas up here at the top of the overpass. You want to start to smooth that out. So this isn't very smooth. You still see a lot of contrast areas, but as you take this up, you'll start to see it smooth out quite a bit. And actually, that is, there we go, as we start to smooth it out even more. And I'm going up pretty high here because there was quite a bit of noise. I'm almost all the way here. That works. Here's before. Here's after. It's really cleaned up the edges of my color and smoothed out all of those contrasty areas. Now I'm going to my blue channel, and the same idea happens in the blue channel. You just take that up until it starts to smooth out in those smooth areas. It's okay if you see the lines when you have like these distinct areas that are different colors. That's not a problem whatsoever. You just need to make sure that it smooths out in those smoother areas. So I'm just going to take this up, maybe do about 0.67, 0.7, a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay, here's before. Here's after. And then when you come to your clean color channel, you're going to want to go into your color noise. So up here in the shadow areas, you're going to see a lot more of this areas where more blotchy colors. These aren't really hard contrasty or contrast like it was in the beginning because we've worked on it quite a bit. But what the clean color does is it allows all of these larger splotchy color artifacts to smooth out and blend together much better. If I go into my RGB mode and look at this right now, you'll notice that especially in the shadow areas and especially in night images, you're going to see all of this kind of color casts happening in the shadow areas that's just not very attractive. So, and you see these blotchy little splotches of color, and that's really what the clean color is going to work on. So let's go back to our color channel. I'm just going to take that up. Usually 0.2 is a good default for this particular one. Here's before and after. Done a lot. But I still see some blotchiness happening. I want to kind of smooth that out even more, so I'm just going to take that up a little bit more. There we are. It's before and after. Okay. And now we get down to our correct black level. The correct black level by default is at 1 because 1 is a really good default number for it. Let me go back to RGB because you're going to need to be in RGB when you work with the correct black level. Let me take my auto brightness off because now when we're RGB we want to actually see the real correct light of the image. Now you might notice there's a bit of a green cast going on within our shadow areas. This is not something you want necessarily, and it's in almost all of the shadow areas at this point. You can see it even in the blacks, which are almost black, but you just see that kind of greenish tint. This is because of the correct black level slider and the color adjustment sliders. The correct black level, as you push that up, is going to try to get to a more natural black. So you can push this up or push it down. Usually pushing up is going to start to, especially when you have these really strong images, is going to start to give you a more natural black color that really was there when you took the image. So if you see that green color tint, know that the correct black level is going to be able to help that usually. At 0, you're going to see a ton of color cast, red color cast in this particular one. It's just the haziness of reducing all of this color noise, especially in the shadow areas. You'll start to just see this kind of not very attractive color cast going on. And it's really hard to get rid of even if you go in to your host program and work on your blacks because it's not going to look at this as being black. So coming in and being able to correct the black levels is a really nice tool to have. So at 1, it looks really green still. If you keep pushing that up, it's going to start to bring back that natural black level. So let's look at our art here. Okay, so here's before, here's after. Let me move that around just a little bit more. Okay, here's before and after. I still have a little bit of a blue color cast here that I'm not really enjoying, so I'm going to take my blue adjust color and take that up just a little. Try to get rid of some of that blue color noise. Okay, that works better for me. And now I'm going to come down to my detail recovery. Now that we've done our noise reduction within the shadow areas, it looks pretty good, but I have lost some of the detail that I want to keep a little bit within the texture of the wall and within some of the actual artistic drawings here. So let me go in my detail recovery and just push that up. I almost find that 0.3 is a great recover detail default. Now that's just a suggestion, but it just brings back texture really well. Here's before the detail recovery. It's kind of flat and blotchy. You have areas that have some texture, areas that are starting to feel a little bit plasticky and flat. As you go to recover detail, it just brings back the texture so nicely. Now then you have your reduce blur, especially for shadow areas. Let's go up to top here. The reduce blur is going to be good sometimes, but sometimes it will add kind of wormy artifacts to dark shadowy areas and flat areas like skies. So be careful with the reduced blur. When you have a lot of texture and lots of detail, the reduced blur will do some really nice things for you, but I use it very sparingly or almost not at all. I do always add grain. Grain is going to be great to give me the illusion of a little bit more detail, and especially if things are starting to get a little bit flat in certain areas, it'll start to bring that back just a little. So I'm going to add some grain. I usually like about 0.2, but I might like a little bit more on this one. Yeah, let's take it up a little bit more. There we go. So let's go to a little detail spot where we can see some shadow areas along with detail. Here's before, here's after. We've kept the lines of the texture of the actual stone by recovering our detail and adding a little bit more grain in there to kind of highlight that. You can see these actual lines. It's really great, the detail that you can keep and still get rid of a lot of any of that any noise that you still have left over. Here's before again, and after. The heavy noise that you see within the lines have all disappeared. Here's before and after, and there we have it. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And that's the first workflow on eliminating shadow noise within low light types of situations. I hope that gives you a better idea of exactly how each slider, especially the adjust shadow noise, the correct black level noise, and some of the detail recovery will help you with those shadow noise. I'm going to go ahead and go over a very fast workflow within the next image, but let's go ahead and take a look at a before and after here. Okay, here's before. Look at all of that noise up there, and you're losing all this detail. It's just, in shadow areas just are going to be much more harder to reduce noise in than highlight areas. And with Topaz DeNoise, you're able to bring back that detail, eliminate the majority of the noise, and have a really clean looking natural image still without it looking plastic. Here's before again in this area, and after. All right, so let's take one more look at it as a whole here. Here's before. Definitely can't see the noise, but you can really start to see the color cast up here and the details start to go away. And after. It's brought back. Everything looks definitely less color cast and less hazy. All right, so let's take a look at this image real quick. And then we can take a look at that city image as I answer some of these questions that are coming in. I see I have quite a few. All right, so let me go ahead and show you the before and after one more time, up close. Here's before. You can see a lot of noise going on in the shadows to give you a little bit better idea. When you take the brightness up, you can see the noise much more in the shadow areas than you can any of the other parts of the image. So over here, look at all that color noise within the actual couch and the shadow noise. And then with DeNoise, It's eliminated. You've kept the texture, the detail, and everything, but you've eliminated the noise. So let's go ahead and look at this with a preset workflow. I'm going to go back to the open, the very beginning, and make a duplicate and go into Topaz DeNoise. This also was a CR2 image. Let's look at the file info. I forgot to do that on the last one. The last one was a really high ISO. This is going to be a more natural type of ISO, I think, probably closer to 2000 or something. Yes, the ISO is 2000 here. The aperture is f4, and it's 1/60th of a second for shutter speed. So it's not definitely the highest amount of noise you can get with high ISO, but it is quite a bit as well. So let's again hop on into Topaz DeNoise. It'll jump to 200% because that is the default that it will start off with. And it will apply the last few settings. Here's before, here's after. I'd say they're a bit too strong for this particular image. So we're going to go back to reset all to get back to the original image. And I'm just going to come out to 100% because, again, that's just where I like to work. You can work at 200% if you choose. Let me say reset all again. And the first thing that if you're going to start off with a preset, the first thing you need to do is get your preview navigator to an area. Even if you have the really heavy shadow noise versus the overall noise, you're not going to want to put these presets into your shadow noise. You're going to want to put it into your mid-tone areas, look at those first, and then come over and adjust for your shadows over on the noise reduction and detail recovery area. So since this is a raw image, I will start off with the raw lightest. See what happens. Okay, so not much. I'm actually going to go into my Luma as well and go to a strong setting so we can really see the noise that's happening. Do I want to do strong? Sure, I'll do strong so we can really see that luminance noise on here. So here's before, and here's after that light setting, lightest. It really doesn't do much. Here's light, raw light. So that's quite a bit. Here's before. Here's after. I'm looking at this pane of mid-tone here. Here's before and after. And let's look to moderate. Oh yeah, that definitely did a lot. Actually, way too much for my taste. Here's before. Here's after. It took out way too much of the detail and then softened it up, and it definitely is starting to look plasticky. So I'm going to come back to the raw light where I feel is a little bit better, and then come over because I can probably take out just a tiny bit more noise here. Going to just come over to my overall strength and maybe push that up to 0.12. That actually was a little bit too much, so let's maybe just a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so here's before. Here's after. I've kept the texture of the wall quite a bit. Here's before. Here's after, but I've eliminated a lot of the noise. So now that I've worked in this mid-tone area with my preset, then I can come in and look at my shadow noise and say, hey, what's going on over here? We have quite a few shadow areas right here. And you'll notice even though that the midtones look good, these shadow areas have a lot of that luminance noise still there. That's not necessarily the color artifacts that I was talking about before, because that's just more dots. So what I'm going to do is come into my adjust shadow, which is actually at 0 for this preset, and just push that up. Maybe to about 0.1. Let's see what happens. So that eliminated quite a bit, but I want to go up a little bit more. Okay, here's before, here's after, again before and after. I've lost a little too much detail here, but I am going to come down to my recover detail and work with that and see if I can recover it in those shadow areas as much as I want to. I'm just going to go up to a highlight area here now because my highlight is also at 0. Here's before, here's after. Just going to take this down and a little bit, not too much. All right. And now we get down to our just color red. It's much faster when you can just go through this really quickly. I'm going to go back over to my midtone area just to check out what's going on. It's pretty smooth. I noticed that my adjust color red is actually negative though, so I'm going to take that up because there is some roughness to it. Ah, there it goes, starts to smooth out. Now, once I get to my adjust color blue, you can see there's quite a bit of roughness there as well, and that's mainly because it's negative on this particular preset, so I'm going to take that up as well, maybe about 0.2. Perfect. Here's before. Here's after. And then we get to our clean color, so I'm going to go to my color. And it looks pretty smooth actually at 0.04, but that default of 0.2 is usually perfect, so I'm just going to go ahead and put it over there. Okay, and now that we get down to our correct black levels, we need to go back into the RGB and check out if we have a color cast within the black areas. Turn off the auto brightness, stay in RGB, and take a look and see if I'm seeing any sort of color cast going on in these dark areas. I'm really not. Yeah, it looks pretty good. I am just going to probably leave that at 1. Yeah, it looks pretty exactly black, so that's nice. Then I'm going to come down to my detail recovery really quickly. And I can tell that I've lost some detail in my black areas, a little too much, so I'm going to push that recovery detail up just a bit. See if I can really bring it back. That started to bring back some of the fur there. The reduced blur, I don't need that. I'm seeing a little bit of artifacts I believe that the reduced blur might be causing. And I am going to add grain. Again, grain is a monochromatic grain that is not noise, but it gives the illusion of a little bit more sharpness and a little bit more natural sort of texture to an actual image. So that's looking really good. And let's see if we need any banding. I'm going to come up here. This is the same camera that uses banding, but the ISO setting is nowhere near as high as it was in the last image. But let's see if I can eliminate some. Aha. This is an image where you actually create it. When you don't need debanding technology, if you use it, you'll actually start to see these lines come up that look like banding noise because it's creating it instead of taking it away. So this is definitely not an image where I need it. I'm going to take it away again. Let me show you that one more time so you can see how it creates it. It's just these lines up here at the top. They're very subtle, but they are definitely distracting. And take that out again. So banding noise is not necessary. I'm pretty happy with this image, so that's how quick you can go really, even by tweaking every single slider. You can take an image that has pretty extraordinary noise and get rid of it completely in the shadow areas and any low light type of situation, keep all the detail very quickly. So let me show you this before and after, and then I'll turn it over to you for questions. And we'll be working with that city image as I answer any questions. All right, so here's, let's scoot back just a little. So here's before. A lot of color noise happening. And after. All right, so let me turn it over to you guys. I hope that gives, again, you an idea of how and which sliders are going to be really effective for your shadow noise versus your midtone noise, which is going to be more general sliders, not necessarily those more specific sliders like the correct black levels and the adjust shadows, etc. All right, Mike says, how much noise reduction is too much? I rarely use more than light or moderate in DeNoise 5. Mike, I rarely use more as well. You don't want things to get plasticky or fake unless that is the direction you're trying to go with your image. In situations where you have fur or detail or whiskers like we do here, you want to keep that detail. You want to make sure that you haven't, let's see here. sorry, I was trying to grow in here. You want to make sure that you haven't eliminated the sharpness of those areas and the texture. So that is one thing to keep an eye out for. If you're starting to soften up textures as opposed to just noise reduction, then you're kind of pushing it a little too far, in my opinion. You want to keep that detail, especially in the focused area. Let's go ahead and go to that nice city one to look at the rest. I'm going to go ahead and take this original background into DeNoise. So any questions that come up, we can work on that. Let me reset all. Okay. Really see the noise in the shadow areas when you take that auto brightness up. So we'll work on that here in just a second. Linda says, snapshot is still a little confusing to me. Please show an example one more time. Sure, Linda, we can do it with this particular image. So let's say I'm going to come to JPEG Light. Ooh, that was actually really strong. Interesting. Stronger than the moderate. Okay. So let's say we get to this point within our noise reduction. This is definitely not the correct setting. I would actually come over here and tweak this manually. Let's say we get to this particular one and we want to take a snapshot so we can come back to it. So I've taken a snapshot. Now I'm going to take my overall strength. I'm going to come reset all and work with this on an individual. Ooh, that's really strong. Those shadow areas have very limited amounts of detail, so you have to be careful sometimes. Okay, now I'm going to just highlight. Okay, let's say we get to this area. I'm just going to go really quickly just to show you about the snapshots. Blue, clean color. Okay, now this is going to be probably pretty strong. Here's before, here's after. Again, here's before and after. I haven't taken back the detail quite yet. So let's say I get to that and I want to take a snapshot and see if that's any better. So I'm going to take a snapshot there. Now I'm going to, let's say, recover some detail. Add some grain. Reduce some blur. And I'll take another snapshot. And now I can go back and forth between all of my snapshots. Let me go to 200% so you can see the difference between all of them. Okay, so you can just toggle between the snapshots by going to previous and next. So I can go previous, next, and you'll see the difference down here in the shadows especially. Let me go ahead and turn that to strong so you can see that. Next. You can see all those adjustments change and see how each one works and which one is the best for you for your image. So that is how Snapshot works. I hope that helps explain it a little bit more. Ken says, when opening a DNG from Lightroom, which preset group should be used, JPEG or RAW? Ken, that's really up to you. I know that I've used a JPEG preset many times on a RAW image, and I've used a RAW preset on a JPEG image before. These are just basically based upon strength and the different types of color noise that you might get. I would say with a DNG that you might want to start with your RAW and see if that works. If that doesn't work as you go stronger and stronger and it's too much, then come down to your JPEGs and start with your JPEGs. These really aren't something that are concrete. If you have a RAW image, you have to use the RAW presets, or if you have a JPEG image, you have to use the JPEG image. You can just see what works best for your particular image. Camera sensors and the type of noise that they produce are going to be different all across the board, so some might be better. Some JPEG images might work better with some of the RAW adjustments that we have set up here for you. So it really just depends. Jean says, what's the advantage of looking at the image in Luma rather than RGB? Jean, I think I explained that, but just in case you wanted to hear, again, it really allows you to see the luminance noise instead of the color noise, because there are several types of noise in each image. And just looking at the RGB, even if you're looking at strong, Let me go back to reset all. You're looking at both the color and the luminance and the banding noise all at the same time. So as you're working with your overall strength, oof, that is really strong for this image. I forgot how small this little crop was. And your adjust shadow, you're going to not be able to kind of separate the color noise from the lumen noise. Whereas if you are able to come in and look at your red, that'll allow you just to see the red noise, the blue, just to see the blue color noise, and then the Luma, just to see the contrast noise within your image, and the luminance noise, excuse me. That will kind of just separate them all and make it a much, but what I think is the much more thorough process, especially when you're working with this really heavy noise that we're talking about today, which the reason we have all of these preview modes is specifically for these really heavy noise things that you really need to separate them out, so you make sure you deal with each of them on their own. Gary says, why is there not a green channel? Gary, any green color cast or anything that you see is going to be able to be handled by your red, blue, and correct black level channels. So if you do end up with a green color cast after you've removed or changed your red or blue, you can come in with your correct black level, and that's going to work with the green a little bit. But we found before it really wasn't necessary that you could handle any sorts of color cast with the adjust color red and adjust color blue. Linda says, for 3 bracketed images used for HDR, should you use DeNoise on each individual image or after the 3 images have been tone mapped together? That's a really great question, Linda. I think that you'll find some people have differing views on that. I personally like to work on it beforehand and put the same settings on each one. So that's kind of important, to not necessarily make one really flat and plasticky looking and then one has a lot of texture. So you'll want to make sure that you have those settings all be the same. And I do know some people who also would rather tone map them together first and then work with the DeNoise at that point. But I think it's up to you and what you feel best or feel looks best. Jenny says, if you go back to FX Lab and use dynamic, does it add noise back into the image? Jenny, the dynamics is going to have some of the similar features of Topaz Adjust. So, for example, we've done DeNoise on this particular image. Now, if we want to go into Topaz Adjust and work with the adaptive exposure and regions, if I push that up too much, it will start to add in or make a little bit more evident noise-like artifacts in here. So as you sit here and work with these 2 sliders, you can come down into your noise. This is going to be specific to the noise within Adjust. And you can add in a little bit of suppression just to get those kind of artifacts out of there, so you can still get a lot of that adaptive exposure in regions. As far as dynamics within Photo Effects Lab, it does not add as much noise as you would find within the adaptive exposure and region sliders. Okay, so if I then come in, go to the dynamics, this is a different type of adjustment. So let me show you, actually, before and after. You're not going to get as much push and pull as you will from the adjust, so it's a little bit better as far as not introducing those noise-like artifacts. The dynamics has the same idea as the adjust, adaptive exposure, and region slider in that it is specific to local contrast as opposed to global contrast, like the contrast slider up here. You can work with the contrast slider, taking the main contrast down and the dynamics up, or even the exposure down just a little, or up, excuse me, and the dynamics as well. Just kind of get a similar effect that you will and adjust, but you won't introduce as much noise. So you shouldn't have to worry about it too much. Let me go 1 to 1 so you can kind of see. There we go. Here's before and after. We get rid of that exposure settings. Our dynamics are really high right now. Here's before and after. Again, it's just more localized contrast, but you don't really see a lot of noise introduced. Henry says, will increasing blue and red sliders to decrease noises in their respective areas cause halos around edges of the image? No, it should not cause halos, Henry. If you push it too much, you'll find that it just flattens things out and it starts to bring in other colors or other casts, but it's not going to produce any halos or any sort of color issues. Here's before, here's after. Now this particular image, we are looking at this at 200%. This already had a bit of a halo because of the actual fluorescence. Here's before, here's after. But as you push red way up and blue way up, you're not going to see any halos being produced on any of the edges that are specific to those color areas. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining me here today. I really appreciate it. Have a great day, everybody.